Sergio here, Max Business Profits, once again with my good friend and home inspector extraordinaire, amongst other things, Rick Koyman from Trade Secrets Inspections. Today we have an interesting conversation. We're going to be talking about insurance requirements here in the state of Florida. And if you don't know already, insurance is a big deal here in the state. A lot of people are opting out if possible. If you don't have a mortgage, you can do that. But other people are kind of locked into these prices that are still high. They haven't really gone down that much. I could tell you from personal experience, I've gotten windows and a new roof, and my rate went down for a little bit and then kind of went back up, and it's kind of bouncing back in between. But Rick's gonna deliver some information to us on what's going on in the state of Florida as far as insurance is concerned, and it should be very interesting. So, Rick, go ahead, start us off.
Awesome to be with you again, Sergio. So, yeah, this is a great time to come back to this topic that we joined into once before on basically the wind mitigation process is what we're going to discuss today. And as far as what kind of updates are going on, they did update the 4-point process a little bit, but mostly what you're dealing with when it comes to your insurance rates is predicated on this discount program of the wind mitigation stuff. So the 4-point is their risk assessment of the four fundamental systems: roof, electric, plumbing, AC, and they go through, and that process is getting updated. And kind of like everything in the world today, the world of AI is making its presence in the insurance industry and in the inspection industry, and of course, in the documenting of things. So this is primarily what is feeding the changes of stuff. And it's interesting to see how the two systems are developing together. And then we as homeowners and customers get stuck in the means of paying the madness of what are we doing here?
Correct. So on the 4-point, or rather the win mit, um, just for people who are listening, clarify what that is and what the requirement is before they can get a policy.
Yeah, so basically the wind mitigation process, it comes as part of the My Safe Florida Home program, which was developed basically in the beginning of the 2000 era. And it was essentially trying to get the older construction homes brought up to the newer building codes by encouraging the policyholders to see a financial benefit from doing the retrofits and the updates and the doors and windows and the roof attachments and stuff like that, to try to make the homes more resilient to the high wind situations, so that the insurance industry stops writing so many large checks and then in turn can reduce the rates for the customers. um,
Incidentally, that program is on hold right now. It is not being funded at the moment because the Florida legislature has decided they have some other things they're trying to work out first. I'm lucky enough to have slid in under the wire and actually had my windows done. And
yeah,
it was an $18,000 bill for windows, which I
mhm.
find absolutely incredible.
And
But I
it's not a big one in the world of
Yeah, or it's
residential.
not. But and I didn't even get my front door done, which is steel, and my back French door, which I'm replacing with a slider eventually. But the point is, they paid out $10,000 of the $18,000 bill. So, and I
Yeah,
applied. It's been 2 years since
right.
I
And the
applied.
My Safe Florida Home project has been intermittent since its inception.
Yeah.
And there's a various list of reasons of why it comes and goes, and money runs out, and then politics, and they pull it and put it back, and the insurance industry, they're behind the decisions of most things in our world. Ultimately, they
How
play the
unfortunate.
game, writing the laws and the rules, and the
Yeah.
politicians get to be part of that because, of the financial interest of things. But yeah,
Correct.
they've gone through and amended the wind mitigation form officially. So originally there was a 2001 form, which was, when the building code, what was the Florida building code, became a thing, which, it originated out of South Florida and Miami-Dade and
Right.
Broward counties. They implemented it in the late 90s. And
That was a
then,
result of Hurricane Andrew, correct?
yeah, right. Andrew was the big hit that changed the insurance industry in Florida, essentially. So in the late 90s, they went to the South Florida Building Code, which this whole thing about building codes and dates, and it gets really confusing because they refer to a year building code like the 2001 Florida Building Code, which we call the FBC, and it didn't get enacted until 2003. And
Right.
then they updated that in 2004 and they called it the 2005 or 6 version. And now they're calling it the 2007
Yeah.
because in 2006 they updated it again. And now they finally brought it to the forum. So the wind mitigation form went from the 2001 protocol, which, the industry introduced, and the homeowners were told that they had to have it done, and it was going to be at their expense to basically not have a collusion, I guess, within the insurance industry so that there was a third party involved. And there's this whole discussion of who should pay for these things and why does the homeowner get to pay for them. And it's important to understand because there's always this question of how much does it cost, right? How much is your win mitt? How much are your 4 points?
Right.
And in the world of business, the competing price game comes in, and ultimately, there's always going to be those players that want the quantity and go. Originally they were $50
Right.
inspections for a win mitt, and then it's a $75 inspection,
Right. Right.
and then the 2001 updates came out, and well, I should say the 2012 update came out because that's when they changed all the building codes in the early 2000s. And then in 2012, they finally updated the wind mitt form again and took out, that was a big change because they were talking about wall construction types and masonry and reinforcements and
Yep.
able end reinforcements and wood construction methods and all these other things because they were worried about gable walls. Essentially was the
Right.
big loser from Andrew. If you had a gable, which is a triangle shaped
Right.
roof,
Right.
right, that wall system is a weak system, a weak point. And we had a lot of houses with those gables getting blown out, and once that happens the house kind of just comes apart, the roof flies away, and then
Well, in
everything
relation
falls
to
out of it.
a hip roof, the gable, if I'm remembering correctly, because if I'm wondering about it, I'm sure somebody else is too. The gables were just these higher points. They were high points where the trusses met.
Yeah,
Correct.
no, that's the ridge line officially. So what you're talking about, the top point where the two slopes meet
No,
together,
not the
called a
top point,
bridge.
but like if you
But
have a garage, you may have a gable.
well, yes, but the hip roof doesn't have any gables.
Right.
So the easiest way to think about
The edges
it,
around that whole roof are the same
yeah,
level on a
right.
hip.
So if you go to the perimeter of your walls or your
Yeah.
house
Yeah.
and you're looking up at the roof, if you're looking at the edge of a roof shingle or a roof tile and not the bottom when you look up at the roof, that's a gable.
Okay. Yeah, it's a
That's the
full point.
easiest way to think of it. So if you look up and see an edge of a roofing product going down a perimeter wall or a rake or whatever it is, it's going to
Right.
be a rake. It is a gable portion. And then we have these clipped hips or
Yep.
Dutch gables or whatever term you want to call them by, where it's a composite of the two systems, and it gets really confusing on when it counts and when it doesn't. And there's all kind of different architectural drawings of roof systems out there. But ultimately, it came down to the insurance industry found through the calculations of the losses that the gable typical roof system was the loser of the bunch.
Right.
So,
Sweet.
in any way they could encourage the building industry to go to a full hip roof system, which is, like a pyramid. Instead of having a triangle on a wall, the whole roof is a pyramid and
Right.
ultimately slopes downward. So you don't have those big wind surfaces. And then this gets even a little more into this conversation here. We're going to go to shortly as far as the pitch goes and the steepness of the roofs, because that's where this is one of the new changes in the forms. It
Gables
and
tend to be steeper, right? They have steeper
it
angles.
it can be, but it's really we're skipping ahead a little bit here, but let's go ahead and talk about it because we're talking about hips and gables.
Yeah.
So in in the form in the document, it went from 7 sections to 9, but in the document is still the roof geometry, as it's called, section. And they
Mhm.
didn't actually change it a whole lot, but what they did change is they they put in this new section called roof slope that wasn't there before. So now they're talking about how steep is the roof pitch, and they ask this specific question, and it says if 2/3 of the main roof area is determined to be greater than a 612 pitch or less than. And that just means if you go 6 inches horizontally, the roof goes up. If you go 12 inches horizontally, the roof goes up 6 inches.
Inches, correct.
Right? So that's where the pitch number goes. So
Right.
the first number is how far up gain do you get for every 12 inches of length, right?
Correct.
So if you have an 812 pitch roof, it's a steeper roof. If
Right.
you have a 312, it's a
Flat.
lower slope roof,
Right.
right? And so the testing and dynamics of roof systems showed that ultimately a flat roof was the first one to blow off. And that's
Really?
basically because of low pressure uplift, right? It's kind of like, you pick
I
up
would
a
have
piece
never
of
guessed
paper
that.
and you blow across the paper lifts up,
Ripples, yeah.
right? And it actually lifts the paper up. And this is how airplanes fly, right? The
Right.
wind over
Lift.
the top of the wing is moving faster than the wind under the wing. And it creates a low pressure on top of the wing. And therefore, the thing in between gets pulled upwards, right? And in this case, the thing in between is the roof. So your roof is a wing,
Yeah.
and it turned out that both this the combination of the material types and assembly and the pitch resulted in flat roof systems coming apart first. And then thereafter, if you had a gable and a low slope, there was the problem with how was the truss attached, and the whole
Right.
roof would lift off, trusses and all, because the truss system wasn't attached to the wall necessarily solidly or through a total load connection all the way down to foundation. So that's where the building code comes in. So the old building code didn't require you to use mechanical clips, metal, hangers and brackets. And when we built houses forever, for 30 years I built houses and we toe-nailed trusses down. So you just put a nail in on either side at an angle and you drove it into the top plate
Yeah.
and away you went.
Right.
Well,
Not anymore.
those are you can imagine you can easily probably pull that apart. And that's what the high winds did is they pulled that apart and the whole roof blew off in a big assembled unit. And it was pretty
Yeah.
amazing to watch, but it did happen.
Yeah.
So then they come along and say, well, actually, as the roof gets steeper, it starts to become a bad thing too. And more importantly, as we go to real steep pitch roofs, we tend to have gables. They tend to be the gable roof types
Mhm.
where there's just two roof slopes that come together and they might be very highly pitched, but on the ends you have these giant triangles, these giant
Right.
gables,
Right.
right? So they didn't like that. So now you had a wall separation and a roofline separation occurring. So the gable system had kind of two weaknesses.
Wow.
But this goes back to this whole why are we doing this and are we doing it correctly when we change things? And honestly, it's not clear. And this goes to the whole point of, man, they changed this stuff and it's going to affect everybody because if you're doing these things, if your insurance calls you today and says you need to update your policy, you have to use this new wind mitigation form. Beginning of the 1st of April, The old form is no longer acceptable. So if, your building contractor, whoever's filling it out for you, and I say that particular because those type of trades, the contractors, the architects and engineers, they're kind of excluded from the need to be recertified. They're just told they're allowed to do it, and
Yeah,
then they get the form and they don't understand it any more than
right,
anybody else would, and it
right.
ultimately gets done incorrectly because it's not clear to begin with. But
Hmm.
like in this roof slope thing, the question simply asks, ultimately, is the slope greater than or equal to 612, or is it less than 612? And I laugh at that because they're looking at giving a credit one way or another. The industry hasn't decided which way they're going to give the credit. They've
Are we
changed this
talking about
form.
giving a credit, or are we talking about penalizing? Because they're
Well, it's
they're probably
always
quicker to penalize
no,
something.
they've already penalized you. They've already gone to the highest risk
You're going
rate.
into the game
And now
already
we're
penalized.
Yeah, so now we're trying to work it
Nice.
backwards
Yeah.
with these forms and these inspections. So you could not have it done, and they're just going to give you the highest risk numbers they have,
Hmm.
right? But you don't want to pay that much. So, okay, let's see how we can reduce it kind of conversation. So they've updated this form in several ways in this regard. But when they changed it from 7 sections to 9 sections for, since 2012, anyways, the industry's been operating pretty standardized that, there was a known amount of credit available for each section. So like say if you were built to the Florida building code, it was generally like a 30% rate reduction, which, that's a pretty good chunk of money. So there goes your rate comes down a pretty good amount.
Right.
If you were built after the 2001 Florida building code was enacted, which ultimately, was like a 2003 year home. Again,
Right.
the numbers and the names are really out of whack, right?
Hmm.
But now they've changed all these definitions and sections, and they literally told us that they haven't come up with what the credits are going to be and what's going to be a credit and what's not going to be a credit. So, like this roof slope thing, where it asks, is it more than 612 or less than 612? Well, the wind study showed that the best roof performance was, between like 412 and 712. Once you got up over 812 and got to steeper roof sections, then there was another problem starting to develop and the roofs got weaker again. But they didn't ask the question that way now. So the sweet spot is kind of a 612 roof. If you have a 412 or a 512 roof, it's still better than a flat roof and it's better than a 1012 roof,
Right.
but that doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, really, how much variation is there in the pitches of roofs these days? Because I don't really see that much variation when I drive around. And
No, and that's because the insurance has been given this credit for so long and
yeah,
been saying, hey, what we really want you to do is build a hip roof with a pitch between 412 and not over 712. And then they went and asked this question right in the middle of 612. Are we at 612, higher or lower? And oftentimes, I go in and now we have to check the roof slope with this gauge, this angle gauge.
go for
And
that.
this is not anything new to the industry to measure
Right.
this stuff. But it's not uncommon to have a 5, a 3.5, whatever the architect drew up that the truss engineers built to create and match the picture to. So
Mhm.
you end up with these weird numbers. But again, it is kind of out there in space. So what are we doing here? Right. So we don't know what that's going to mean. Right. But again, who does these inspections and how this form gets filled out, even though they haven't quite even gotten it clear in their own minds what they're going to do with it, these things get filled out wrong so often. I can't even describe it to you how often I ask people all the time, well, do you have your old WinMed? I'd like to see what was previously marked on the form.
Right.
And a good 50% of the time it changes. And it's not because the form changed, it's the same form, it's just another person doing it. And I'm like, well,
Right.
they gave you a credit that didn't apply to you because they didn't understand what they were being asked and they marked the form wrong. And so all along, you've had a false policy. Well, that matters because when you go to get a payout on a claim, the
They realize,
adjusters
yeah,
are either in favor of or not. And in the case of a storm where there's a lot of payouts happening, they put up the no sign, right? And everything gets declined. It's always a no from the start, and you
right.
got to fight to get the yes. Well, now if you got these forms completed and they can go, well, your policy was written on predicated documents that were false or incorrect, so we're not even going to honor the policy.
Wow.
Well, that goes back to how much did you pay and who did the form. And, the $50, $75 guy versus, where we are now, where this thing takes a good amount of time to go through. It takes a lot of studying to understand how to do it right.
Yeah,
So it's no longer $100 or $150 inspection. We're up more at, $200 worth of time
yeah.
for this wind mitt thing, So who does it is always a question, and why does it matter? And in the world, when we go to buy insurance, we're always like, what's the cheapest, right? So you always get sent to the lowest guy to fill the form out, the worst, to get the lowest policy rate
Um,
that
so
that
much
can
really
easily be found.
considering who's filling it out,
Yeah,
and if they're,
it's really a
I'm
comical
just
circle.
curious. Has anybody ever been litigated against for filling out the form incorrectly, like an inspector
Uh,
or a
this
contractor?
is,
I
yeah.
mean,
Well,
you
here,
can't
this
blame.
is
On one hand, you can't blame the homeowner
okay.
because they're not the one filling it out and they don't know anything about it. And on the other hand,
Right.
you can't blame the insurance company because they're like, well, we thought we were insuring this A, and we're
Yeah.
actually insuring B.
Okay, so this is a fantastic question and a great point to start this. And this is a real turn off of the specifics of the form and goes to what in the hell is going on? Well, the answer to your question is a little long, but it goes like this. So the storms came and damaged a bunch of stuff. So like maybe it was Andrew, maybe it was Irma, maybe it was Ian, whatever. And there's all this devastation out there, and the industry wants to find correlations. After it's all said and done, 5 years later they want to look back at what they just went through and figure out how to not put themselves in that position again.
Sure.
So they didn't have records. There was nothing to go back to make a correlation from. They had asked for all these documents, but they're all kind of out there in independent world through whoever policy or agent sold it to you, and they're not readily available to go back and kind of analyze, let alone were they taking account of the errors and who was making or repeatedly filling the form out incorrectly or committing fraud or whatever it
Mhm.
was. But
Right.
there was no sound place where all the data was being put in the insurance
No
industry.
central location.
Right. So now we are here today with the new greatest assistant in the
Now, when
world.
you're talking about the data, you're talking about
Mhm.
the actual mitigation forms when they're filled out. They're not being
I'm
held
talking
by each.
about it. I'm talking about the whole picture, whether
Okay.
it be the construction plans, the documents that the insurance industry that were filled out for these win mits and 4 points, and who filled them out. They revamped this whole system to answer that specific question. This whole thing is going down because of this new AI ability. So now all these documents are all being sent to one central location for the data to be collected. And now they're going to be able to say, I want to know on such and such street how many houses had gables, and it'll just pop them up. And then they want to know, I want to know in this town how many inspections were performed by said inspector or contractor,
Right.
and then correlate how they're doing their job and what errors are being, you know, pushed into the system from where. And now it's all going to be correlated. So it's weird because citizens in particular, if you were an insurance agent and you submit a policy for underwriting, every agent out there, if you were sending it or are sending it to citizens, you can only make 3 errors in a year, or they will not allow
Whitelisted.
you to submit documents to them
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as an insurance office, that covers all your employees out there selling policies. So the underwriter gets anything wrong with the application 3 times, that whole office is shunned
Well,
from
this is
submitting.
discriminated against, not just the
Yeah,
one.
and it's a rolling time period. It's
Wow.
not like it resets at the end of the year. It's a rolling thing.
So
So
what do they
they
go? What are
stick
they?
on there for 3 years.
Yeah. So are they providing the education to these agents to help them fill
No,
out the? Well, of course
no,
not.
no, they provide the educations to the agents on how to do the document from their side. But
Hmm.
again, this is hilarious because in the inspection world, we get sent to these trainings all the time. And we hear all this stuff from manufacturers and underwriters and whatnot. And ultimately, the question is always, well, where is the trade being educated on this? Where, whether it be a plumbing or an electrician or a roofer, when
Yeah.
are they brought in and brought up to speed? And it just goes back to the GC or the original license holder, and they have to renew occasionally. And then it just goes to what updates were there, and did you remember them, and did you put them, can you pass the renewal test?
So
But
the insurance companies are training them to be discriminatory, but not training the tradespeople to do it correctly.
yeah, in the world of the trades, like an electrician doesn't understand, generally speaking, what a non-insurable panel is because they're not selling insurance. They'll come in and look at a challenger panel and say, I don't see anything wrong with it. There's
Right.
nothing going on here to warrant replacing it, except the insurance industry sees it as not a properly functioning system and they don't want to write policies for it.
Mm.
Right. So there's kind of two different
Well,
perspectives.
that's based on the fact that Challenger has had problems in the past, and there's a history of
Yeah.
failure or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
And this gets so bizarre because now
yeah.
there are actually there are underwriters writing policies for challenger panels again, even though, for 14
Well, I
years they
mean,
weren't
could that
doing
be
it.
based on the fact that the product has been improved?
No, it's the same old
It's
ass
the same
panel they're
old.
writing the policy for.
All right, somebody got
So they're
slipped a little bit of
very
green.
confused. Yeah. So
Yeah,
ultimately,
turn your head.
we're doing all these exercises to help the insurance industry understand how it can make more money and hold other people responsible, essentially, all the
Right.
way down to us filling out the forms so that they can root out the evils and make the world a glorious, better
So
place.
what? How does that translate to Joe Schmo or Sergio, who's sitting here going, "Okay, it's time to renew my policy," and they're jacking me about $700 a year.
Yeah, right. So, this is why we want to talk about this today because it's important as a homeowner to have an understanding of what they are looking for and know what those goals are. One, so that you can either plan to meet them in the future, or if in fact you're doing something to your house that may otherwise either be a detriment in that regard
Right.
or just make it not available to be inspected again. And in particular, the big one that comes to mind is spray foam insulation, right? So this is a great conversation of I see a lot of attics getting spray foamed, especially in a new construction house. Well, 3 or 4 sections of these documents have to do with what you just covered up with spray foam and can no longer be recorded. And now you just don't know. So you don't get the option to have those discounts anymore. Are they there? Yeah. Can we prove it? No. And there's end of the question. So, spray foam roofing has been a real thorn in the side for a long time because one, it hides how is the roof deck nailed, what are the nails, can we see
Yeah,
the
it can hide
underlayment
the
through the
flaws.
sheeting, are the trusses attached to the wall with brackets, and how many nails or screws are put in them. And now
Right.
that they've changed all these forms, gotten specific on those questions in a lot of ways, especially on the roof attachment stuff. And they're getting very granular in checking things. And they're including language that says, stuff like installed according to manufacturer's instructions. Well, in specific to a manufacturer instruction, let's say Simpson Strong Ties is a manufacturer of truss brackets and fasteners and stuff. But they're going to manufacture a bracket and then they're going to manufacture the fasteners to be used with that bracket because they're going to engineer and test it in accordance to those products. And then they're going to sell you their screws and their nails and their brackets. Well, the manufacturer instruction says what? You have to install it with a Simpson strong tie screw or nail,
Or you
or
void the warranty.
it's got to be this specific screw that's used in this specific
Right.
hole. And then the installer goes, well, I got Tapcons in the van, right? And they're the same damn thing, but they're made by Tapcon and not
Yeah.
Simpson. Well, according to the forum, that's not okay.
Right.
There's no difference in the
I
material or,
ran out of your brand and I had to finish the job, so I grabbed a bunch of these.
yeah,
I
right.
know
So
how that goes.
now there's going to be people out there who are like, well, those brackets are not installed properly. They
Right. And if
might
it's
be
covered up,
installed
can't
okay,
verify it. If I can't verify it, I can't give you the benefit of the doubt.
right? But the picture of the bracket with the screw head ultimately doesn't correlate together because they're two different names.
Right.
And they're not asking, is it a 4 3/4 inch screw? They're asking, does it follow manufacturer's instructions?
Right.
Right. So now we fall in this rabbit hole of, well, we can litigate that all day and find a way out of everything.
Right.
Because, ultimately, an
Doubt.
attorney will find a word to make things turn left when was everybody was going right.
Yeah.
So this is what's happening in this world with the wind mitt forms, and it's not making it better; it's making it worse. It's essentially trying to collect more data is the goal, and hold people more accountable and make the system better. And again, you ask the government to make it better, and how's it go?
So, what I'm hearing you say too, what it boils down to is a lot of it is your choice of the inspector or whoever's doing that
Right,
particular inspection, because it's either a question of, do they have the competency, do they have the integrity, and do they have the will to make it
right.
right?
And in particular to your roof system, the roofers aren't being told these things.
Yeah.
So they're the ones who are doing the renailing and putting this stuff on, but they don't know they're doing it from their point of view of install and whatever. It's fine, it doesn't leak or it's not going anywhere. That's not
Whatever's
what the insurance
expeditious at the
question.
moment.
That's not what underwriting's asking though,
Yeah.
right? So ultimately the expert in the field isn't being told the update in its entirety to have an understanding of why it mattered to do A and not B. And B was always what they were doing anyways, and they just continue to do B. So yes, it matters greatly who does it, and it's very, from my perspective, I'm going to always try to be correct. I'm going to ask for more money for my time, and I'll take the time to educate my customer and whoever I'm talking to and why this is correct and that's not correct.
Right.
And that's in your interest when you go to file the claim because of the escape points, right? So when do we want to pay more and who do we get to trust? It gets very tough to make that choice as a homeowner, right? Because you're not going to call around and ask for the most expensive guy to come do your insurance documents.
Not only that, but if you don't know the difference, right? I mean,
You're
you and I
never
have
going to
talked
know.
about, well, yeah, and you and I have talked about this in the past on a different level where, if they don't know the difference between apples and oranges, it's all apples. And the only
There
the
you
only
go.
difference is price,
Yes,
which is
absolutely.
not the case at all.
Right, absolutely. Right. So, the great example is metal roof systems. I hear all the time it's an 80-year roof product. I've never seen an insurance policy written on a roof that old.
Give them 80
Right.
years.
I mean, and ultimately, the question always comes back to who gets to decide when that roof system is no longer performing its function properly and it's time to be replaced, especially in a metal roof system, because say it looks fine and it's 50 years old. when do we get to say that roof's timed out and what are we talking about when we are? And a lot of times when it comes to insurance, what they're looking at is the water resistance layer, which they consider to be the underlayment at this point. So those underlayment products are generally 20-year products, right? So
Literally.
yeah, who gets to say when the metal roof's expired? The insurance industry does. And we get to make the form fill out thing. And when we do that and we're asked, well, how long does a tile roof last? Well, we get a chart. And the chart says, well, if you're in South Florida, the expected life integrity of that product is 35 years
Which
max.
is all built on actuary tables and nothing on real data.
Yeah. So again, it's very murky to say that, you're ever going to buy a 50-year roof product.
Right. Well, look at my roof as an example, right? And we've talked about this where my roof was actually very well maintained, and I had aftermarket products applied to the roof to keep it, but it didn't matter because it was reaching its whatever that deadline is on
It's a,
age.
yeah,
That they're
on the
like, yeah,
chart.
it could look wonderful, but we already know it's a 7 year roof. We are
That's
at
what
year
we've
seven,
decided.
and yeah, and we're
That's
still going to charge you for
where
it.
we're
Well,
at. Yep.
why did I spend 3 grand a year putting all kinds of oils on my asphalt shingle to keep them pliable and keep the media on it and everything else when I didn't get any credit for it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
For sure. And in particular to those lubricant products, those roof conditioners. There's actually one out there that is Florida product approved for increasing roof age.
but they
But
won't
I've
acknowledge it.
been told over and over again by so many different underwriters that they don't give anything for that.
I know, I know the product because it's the product I used.
And there we are.
Yeah, here we are.
And here we are. So
three
if you,
thousand $3,000 later and finding out, well, now I mean I had a new roof put on,
yeah,
but at the time it's like, you and I was like at my wit's end. I was like, I don't understand. I spent 3 grand, keeping this roof in prime condition. I've had no trees around me dropping all kinds of branches and
sure.
stuff. And they're like, yeah, no, it's a 7 year roof or 8 year roof or 10 year roof, whatever. Sorry, we want it replaced. You want it replaced. Well, let me just drop 15, 16, 18 grand.
Yeah. And then, in the roof world, this form comes in a big deal because in that world of underlayment in Florida, everything has to have what's called a secondary water resistance layer, which is a misnomer because I just said secondary
Mm-hmm.
when they consider it to be the primary
Primary. Right.
waterproof layer. So it's a very bizarre gray world of who and where and when. And now they've made it more complicated by trying to allow more things like you don't have to put peel and stick on the entire roof now. You could get away with just doing the seams. You can use seam tape, which is, 3.5 inch wide roll of the peel and stick, and just run it across all the seams
And then what do you put on the rest of the roof?
being vertical. And well, at that point, it's up to you. You can put felt on it or synthetic or whatever, but that's considered the secondary water resistance layer. Now, what we're calling the primary water resistance layer now.
Well, yeah. So what's the primary? The plywood? I mean,
No, it's still going to be
the
the under.
tile, the
They're
concrete
just
tile, which
they're
is
just
ornamental.
calling it the wrong name,
Yeah.
but
Right.
they're always going to come back to the underlayment. And
Yeah.
now they're saying there's other ways of doing it, and again, we come to spray foam because this is a huge confusion. They put spray foam on the form. It says spray foam products. Spray foam must be installed along rafter deck intersections, all panel joints, etc. Check here if the entire roof deck underside covered. Well, what the hell? So what we're talking about is there's two kinds of foam in the world. There's adhesive foam and then there's insulating foam.
Correct.
Ultimately, everybody thinks about what is insulating foam. It's an open cell spray foam, and
Right.
you can put your finger in it. It's
Right.
soft,
Right. It's
and
fluffy.
that's insulating material, and that's sprayed on the entire surface. So therein goes, check here if the entire roof deck underside covered. And I say that because that's how it's written. Like it's not even good grammar, but that's how it's written.
Right. Right.
And then we're asking this in a question about, is there a secondary water resistance layer, because they want to give the credit to spray foam, but that credit applies to adhesive spray foam,
Right.
which
Because
is
it's the only way you'll
applied
get it to stick to the bottom of the.
it's applied to
Yeah.
the truss and the roof decking,
Yeah.
and 4 inches down the truss and 4 inches across the roof deck, and the triangle filled in the middle, and then you see the roof deck, and then you see the next truss with the side, and then you spray a little bit across where the middle seam is,
Mm.
so it's this grid pattern of spray
Yeah.
foam.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to qualify as the secondary water resistance layer.
Huh.
Well, it's not stated that way for sure. Let's just begin there. How many people out there actually understand the difference between the two foams? They didn't ask that. They did kind of by asking, is the entire underside covered? But they didn't say why they're asking that. And is that a disqualifier or a qualifier?
Right.
They're not saying. They're just collecting data, is what they say. They're like, we don't know yet. We're just collecting the data. And it's like the 612 roof thing. Well, you're asking a silly question. Like,
Right.
hey, but what are we going to do with it? I don't know yet.
Right.
So here we are.
Yeah.
Things have gotten more complicated, a lot. Um, it's gotten more difficult, and they're allowing more newer products, which was the goal. Um, but again, how do you prove it down the road? And that's why I say, from the homeowner standpoint, it's kind of imperative that you understand what it is they're asking and looking for, so that you can hold the documents over the ownership of the house and be like, no, I have, this is what it was put together with. So,
Yeah.
like an example, a roof truss attached to a wall in the past has always been put in with a metal bracket of some kind.
Right.
Right? And it's attached to the truss, or it loops over
Right.
it,
Right.
attached
Yeah.
to the wall, or it's in a bomb beam.
Right.
And in the world of retrofits, forever, the industry's been asking, well, they want us to update these things, but that's a really hard thing to update on an already existing structure, to go in and put these brackets in. So the industry came up with truss screws, which is just a really long screw.
Yeah.
You can put it in from the bottom or from the top, but you're putting it into the wall plate, up into the truss, or from the truss down into the wall plate.
Mhm.
You can never see that again. Once the screw's in there and the
Yeah.
wall's covered and the roof's decked, and you look at it, you
You
don't
won't
see
know.
a damn
Right.
thing,
Right.
right? But there's a screw in there. Well, you told me to show you a photo proving there was a screw in there. Well, how do we do that? Um, well, you could cut a hole in the wall and look for the screw head, is one of their answers. And you can put a little access door in your wall so that you can open it up in the future and show that, it's right there. Um, Ultimately, from my standpoint, I'm like, well, we had an engineered, accepted, stamped plan that the city mandated we have to build the house. The
Right.
city sent out a county employed inspector to
Inspected. Right.
verify that that was done. They're not holding responsibility on compliance, even though they're the authority having jurisdiction. And they're saying, well, we're not sure if documents is alone enough for us to use as proof, because we all know there's a lot of shady work going on out there, and things aren't in particular being done, or they're not being done according to manufacturer's instructions. So we want the third party aftermarket to go out there and verify down the road that it was done correctly.
Right. And that'll be on the homeowner's dime.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, how do you prove the screws there?
Right.
Right? And then they say stuff like, Well, can I use provided pictures from the homeowner? No, they have to be from the contractor with a geotag on them. You're kidding me. Like you're serious right now. Yeah. Yeah. That's I mean it's crazy. But
Complicated and convoluted.
yeah, so
So
the
to
updated
wrap it
law
up, I
not
mean, you
uh,
you got more, or is there?
oh we could go on about this for an hour. It's not worth it. It's just it's
Well,
worth understanding from a
yeah,
homeowner standpoint that maybe it's in your interest to spend a little bit of time on these little nuanced details, especially if you're doing updates. Like you did doors and windows at your house, but you didn't
yeah.
do the doors, you did the windows. And then after the fact, you found out that they still weren't going to give you a discount.
No,
That
they gave
it
me a
might
very
say
little.
Florida
They gave me a
Home.
$30 discount
They
for
gave you
Windows.
they gave you 10 grand to
Yeah,
update the house. You didn't get the full story.
right,
And guess what? You saved $30 and you spent 18,000. Well,
right,
how do
and
I get
yeah,
the discount? Well, the devil's in the details.
right.
Yeah, right. And then it
And I'm
goes
not
back.
going to replace my front door because it's a steel front door, and I see no reason to replace that door.
And
And I don't know what I
ultimately,
would replace it with anyway that would make it any
and
better.
and here goes the importance of why we're talking about this. Because you know what it comes down to and why you would replace that door? Because the new door has a compliance sticker on it.
Right,
A sticker, a
right,
compliance.
right,
That's the difference,
right.
right? Now there is other differences to it. The door got tested differently. It might be manufactured a little bit differently. In particular, to steel doors, I like to give people the understanding of
Yeah,
why they won't give you the credit for your outswing steel door as being, impact resistant. Well, how are you going to open it in is your question, right? Like you could shoot two by fours at it until it goes through it,
yeah.
but it's still not
Never
going
going
to
to
penetrate
happen.
the door. Well, it will ultimately because the new door has a manufacturer install instructions that says you have to install it with this size bolt on this spacing around the door frame, and the door frame was assembled differently, and your old door was put in with a couple of wood screws or a couple of 16 penny nails and wood shims, and that ultimately is its biggest weakness. So the door might not get damaged, but the whole door might come out of the house, meaning the frame and all might
Right.
get
So it's not really a
might get
question of the
pulled out.
door, it's a question of the frame holding the door.
Yeah, because it's a whole unit. And
Yeah,
again, it goes back to this whole thing where they've added these little words like manufacturer's instructions, which is a
interesting.
small statement, but big a big thing,
Yeah,
right?
makes
So
sense.
that's where it comes in. So when I come over to your house and I say, well, I understand, Sergio, it's an outswing steel door, but the thing is I got to show a picture of it, and it's pretty obvious that it's an older door predating when they did the testing. So there's no way it can comply. There's no way it was tested to comply. Even
Right,
if it does comply, there's no proof of it. And where is your homeowner weakness or exposure at? The frame and the install of the whole door. So that sort of makes it relevant to you, but it makes it relevant to you when you buy the new door to make sure that whoever's putting it in
right,
understands why the manufacturer's instructions are important because they're just going to put the door back in the way they've always put doors in,
right,
right? Nobody's gone out and told the contractor, hey, you got to take a 3 hour class on how to install a
right,
door. They're
right.
like, you're
Yeah,
out
I
of
don't
your
think
mind.
so.
You
Right,
gotta get a real job, dude. I got shit to
right,
do. Well, it
right. Well,
mattered on
and
your
it does kind
insurance.
of make sense. I mean, it does kind of make sense in that respect. But, and I imagine that's why, you're paying seven to $10,000 for a door,
Yeah.
because I guess all that crap that goes along with it.
Yeah, for real. So yeah, it gets really sticky on these things. In particular, especially doors and windows. Windows in particular, the impact rating on, what the industry calls penetrations, which are
Yeah,
holes in your structure where you
yeah,
put a window or a door.
Well, yeah, and I'm
As a
happy
big
I got the windows. I mean, look, I mean, I had builder grade windows, and this house is
sure.
built in '92.
Oh,
So, and for
yeah,
years, every
there's a
time there was
win
a
to be
storm,
had.
it was plywood and tap cons, you know.
Yep.
So now
And
I don't
then
have
the
to do
funny,
anything.
it's on the form still.
What? What's that?
The exterior opening protections, wood structural panels meeting FBC 2007, meaning plywood shutters,
Hey,
is still on the form
that's
as being
crazy.
acceptable. There is a spec in the building code that tells you how the fasteners are supposed to be spaced, where they're supposed to be put, which ones
Right,
are
right,
allowed.
right.
And you can do all of that. And guess what? There
Okay.
hasn't been and there will not be a discount applied to wood structural panels, but
Interesting.
yet it's on the form. But the industry, the underwriters, they'll blatantly tell you, yeah, they're not, there won't be, there hasn't been, and there never probably will be a discount applied to that. So we just put it in there so that if you have them, you feel like they got accounted for, right? They call them legacy items. Like,
Right.
why are they still on the document? Well, we just still want them there.
Well, and I'm sure you go to certain communities that are a little bit older, and a lot of them are still probably using it.
Yeah, and occasionally,
You know,
on a rare occasion that they are properly put together and set up, at least
they
the
function.
homeowner thinks that they're
Yeah,
getting it documented,
yeah.
right? So they, if they left it on the form as a legacy item,
Right, right,
but
right.
they're not, there's still no credit for it. So, and if you have aluminum shutters from the late 90s, especially accordion shutters are big for this.
Hmm.
They're very heavy aluminum shutters. They're very strong. They're adequate all day long.
Yeah,
What are they missing? The sticker.
the sticker.
The sticker. The Florida Product Approval Number is what it comes
Interesting.
down to. And yeah, right. So if you're putting a new door or a window in, they all have stickers on them nowadays. They all will fall off like any other sticker always has. And more importantly, they'll get painted over. And ultimately, that can and will remove the credit because it's not documentable. Like I can't prove the sticker, right? So I don't know. Garage doors are a great one. The garage door comes to the installer without the sticker on it. The installer literally applies the sticker. The sticker has a list of like 7, 8, 9, 10 different manufacturer numbers, Florida product
The
approval.
numbers. Yeah, yeah.
Some are impact resistant, some are wind resistant, and the installer takes a marker and puts a black dot in one box, and there's no way to correlate what's written on that sticker to what's on the label on the side of the door. So, in order to get it confirmed, you have to call the manufacturer and have them send you the spec sheets for the specific door at that specific address. Not in a like, where in the world are we going with this stuff?
Right.
And it goes back to, well, if I could take a picture of that label with the box black dotted, they're still accepting that as proof. But that was literally applied by the guy who put the door in. And I
Right.
see them more often than not marked. Like they'll put the sticker on, but
But
the
no,
guy who
yeah.
put the sticker on has no idea what the hell that sticker means, and there's
Right.
no give and tell on the side of the door to say, "Oh, well, yeah, it's this manufacturer number right here."
Yeah. Jose was just told to put it on when you're done with the job.
Yep, and it matters because that's one of the doors in your system. So that
Mm.
could be a disqualifier when you have everything else in the house, and it could still be a compliant product. But what are we missing? The label,
Sticker. The sticker.
the sticker.
Well, okay. So we've gone a little long, but that's okay because there was some really good information here. But I mean, the bottom line for the homeowner, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I see two things. Number one, they should probably know some of this stuff to begin with, but they don't really need to know some of this stuff if they know somebody like you.
Yeah, and you ultimately, as a homeowner, you need to know to ask a lot of questions. And don't get
But
all
if you
your
don't, if you can't discern what the answers are,
right. Yeah, and don't assume that in particular, a contractor, an installer, has the newest pertinent information to what goal you're trying to meet. Like they're trying to install a door or window,
They get
you're trying to get an insurance discount.
right.
We're talking about two different things.
They might be, yeah,
Yeah. So you need to ask a lot of questions and then make sure you're asking it from the proper place to get the answer you're looking for, which it doesn't make it easier, but it is the way it is. And that's all I can say about it. Like, just because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean that's not what we're doing.
right. Well, they just call you and ask you a bunch of questions. All
Yeah, you go right ahead. That's fine. That's what I'm here for. I
right. Well,
love to
Rick,
answer questions.
give us your contact information as usual.
Yeah, the phone all the time. 239-537-1186. You can get me on email at rick@tradesecretsinspections.com with the S's on secrets and inspections. And you can text the phone number if you like to. But yeah, please reach out because, like I said, ask the questions, get the right answers is ultimately where you're at. And yeah, it's going to be a
Well,
good
people
time.
should probably go to your website because you've got some very good information on your website as well as
Sure.
previous podcasts like this.
Yep.
And I happen to like your site quite a bit. So why don't you tell everybody what that is?
Yeah, it's just tradesecretsinspections.com. There's definitely a lot of info on there for you. We like to keep it up to date and post it. And interesting enough, I just for the fun of it asked Chat GPT this morning to tell me what's the differences in the new wind mitigation program, and it had no idea what I was asking it.
Well, you just made ChatGPT very happy because now it has something to answer somebody else with. All
There you go,
right, my
right?
friend. Always good talking to you, and looking forward to the next topic.
Awesome. Good
All right,
talk. We'll do it again.
be well.